This Week in Startups is brought to you by Walker Corporate Law, a boutique law firm specializing in the representation of entrepreneurs. Visit them at walkercorporatelaw.com. And Squarespace. Start building your website today at squarespace.com. Enter offer code TWIST at checkout to get 10% off. Today, Jason talks to Blake Scholl, founder and CEO of Boom Technology, about his supersonic passenger airplane scheduled to hit the skies in 2017.
Mach 1 is the speed of sound, and all the major commercial aircraft, private jets, everything except a few military aircraft fly subsonically today. So about 85% of the speed of sound is typical speed, 500 and some miles per hour. Concorde flew at Mach 2, and Boom will fly at Mach 2.2.
What is Mach 2?
Mach 2.2 is like 1451 miles per hour. So,
wow.
Yeah, it's really fast.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to This Week in Startups. We're in a new studio location, testing some new things out. And speaking of new things, today we're going to talk about supersonic flight. Humans got faster and faster and faster over the course of history. We could move around the planet at hundreds, then thousands of miles. And then suddenly, the fastest plane in the world, which was developed, I believe, the Concorde in the 60s and the 70s, went out of commission, right as I was able to afford a ticket. This infuriates me. You could get to London from New York in like 3.5 hours or something. And then right as I'm able to buy one of these goddamn tickets, what happens? But they decommission it.
Yeah.
And sadly, one of them blew up on takeoff. Mm-hmm. Did that have anything to do with it being supersonic, or it just had to do with these like weird tires?
It was really an accident that could have happened to any airplane.
Any airplane.
Yeah. Nothing to do with supersonic flight. It ran over a piece of debris.
And then on takeoff.
A lot of things went wrong that day.
Yeah.
Ran over debris, punctured the wing, taking off on the wrong runway, over max weight. They landed just, very, very close to a diversion runway, or crashed close to the diversion runway. They almost made it.
Wow.
Yeah. It's really sad.
Now, did that crash derail supersonic flight, or was it the expense? Why did we get so fast, have this amazing technology, and then not have it continue?
Yeah.
And when did that happen? When did they decommission the final?
It was 2003, so it went back into service after the accident. That wasn't really the showstopper. But the reality is the death of supersonic flight happened in the 70s.
Okay.
Supersonic flight never changed the world, never took over the way the jet age did. Right. And the reason was that we really rushed into it. And we built Concorde before it was possible to do it economically. So a ticket on Concorde cost $20,000. And yet there were 100 seats on the airplane. And you just can't find 100 people who want to pay $20,000 to go somewhere twice a day on very many routes. And so the result is then you get no economy of scale, only 20 airplanes ever built. That's further pressure on ticket prices. And the whole thing is more thud than boom.
What happened to all of those Concordes? Where are they?
They're in museums now. It's so sad.
They're in museums.
They're in museums. When British Airways and Air France shut them down, Richard Branson actually tried to buy the fleet and was going to find a way to keep operating them. And it's one of these things where, you don't want to embarrass the big guys. And they said, we'd rather put them in museums than have Richard show he can make it work.
Now, you have this crazy idea that you're going to bring it back.
Yes.
Who are you and what qualifies you to bring back what...
Yes,
the French and the English could not.
Right.
I mean...
Well, Jason, like you, I never got to fly on Concorde, and it pissed me off.
Right.
And, I had the first part of my career was all doing internet stuff, startups, tech things. But meanwhile, I got my pilot's license, and since the 2000s, I've been waiting for somebody to do this.
Right.
Because I want to go Mach 2.
Right.
And eventually I realized that I might have to start the company if I want to have it happen.
Explain to everybody what Mach 1, Mach 2 is. Where do current planes fly? Where did the Concorde fly? Where does the Boom fly?
Yeah, so Mach 1 is the speed of sound. And all the major commercial aircraft, private jets, everything except a few military aircraft fly subsonically today. So about 85% of the speed of sound is typical speed, 500 and some miles per hour. Concorde flew at Mach 2. And Boom will fly at Mach 2.2.
What is Mach 2?
Mach 2.2 is like 1451 miles per hour. So,
wow.
Yeah, it's really fast. I mean, the way to think of it is what it does for your life, though. Like you leave New York, first flight of the day, 6 a.m. You land in New York with the time difference, 2:30 in the afternoon, London time. And then you can get downtown, get business done, go out drinking. You can have 7 hours in London, still get back to New York by 8 o'clock New York time.
Wow.
So you can tuck your
So
kids
you
into
think
bed.
3 hours is...
About 3.5 hours each way.
3.5 hours each way. Now, I don't know if I introduced you, but you're Blake Scholl.
Yep.
You're a former internet guy. You made a little bit of money at some point, I guess. And then you started flying around in a plane. Why do all these internet cats want to go fly planes? What is it about internet people and private aviation? Because it's obviously a trend.
Yes.
Is it just because it's like an expensive thing, or because you want to be like in control of something very technical? Why did you take up aviation?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a passion since childhood.
Oh, okay.
But there's something magical to flying a plane, especially a small one. On one hand, it's kind of technical, and so if you're a geek, you like that. And on the other hand, it gives you this very direct experience of having your life in your own hands. And so to a certain kind of person, that's very appealing.
A suicidal person, or just a risk taker,
or a little bit of a risk taker. An adventurer. Yeah.
It does seem like the people I know who like that are not dissimilar to motorcycle riders, where it's like I want to be in control of something a little bit dangerous. Okay, so you have the idea for Boom, and when did you have this idea that? And how did you go about vetting that it could be not just an idea but a company?
Yeah, what started about 2 years ago. So I sold my first startup to Groupon, spent a couple of years at Groupon, then left, and I wanted to do another startup, and I wanted to work on something that I was super passionate about. Because many times what makes the difference between success and failure in a startup is are you working on something that you care so much about that you keep going through the thick and the thin. And so I figured I would make a list of all my ideas in descending order of how awesome it would be if they worked. And I'd work down that list.
Great.
And so I thought I'd get the supersonics thing out of my system in a couple of weeks of research.
That was number one?
That was number one.
Because for me, number one is like a calorie-free pizza, or like a pizza that you eat and it actually removes the fat from your body. That was number two for you?
Right. I was trying to eliminate science fiction.
Right, exactly.
And so I thought I would get into this and find that it was science fiction.
Right.
Because it seems like such an obviously good thing if you could do it.
Right.
And what I found in a couple weeks of research was that most of the conventional wisdom, like if you go on Quora, or just read articles about why don't we have supersonic airplanes, people say that's because you can't fly over land and they're too expensive. But if you look at it quantitatively, it's actually not true.
Okay. Which piece? Well, actually, you know what? When we get back from the commercial break, I think it's a good cliffhanger. When we get back from our partner break, I want you to tell me what you found that people's conventional thinking was wrong about the economics of this when we get back on This Week in Startups. Hey, everybody. Let me stop for a moment, this amazing episode, and tell you about the Walker Corporate Law Group. Yes, they are a boutique law firm that specializes in the representation of entrepreneurs and startups. And Scott Walker is the founder of that company, and he is a personal friend of mine, and he does a great job working with startups. I have literally introduced him to dozens, maybe hundreds now, of startups, and they all rave about the services of the Walker Corporate Law Group because their lawyers have decades of experience. You're not going to get junior associates who are getting on-the-job training with your startup. No, they're going to help you with mergers and acquisitions, licensing, terms of service, privacy policies, formation, all this kind of stuff, fundraising, and they're really great at it. And they do fixed fees. They don't want to surprise people with crazy bills. They think that billable hours can reward inefficiency, so they'll just be fair with you. And that's what I love about them, because if you're a startup, you don't want to get that sticker shock and get a huge bill. Make sure you use the Walker Corporate Law Group, and you can do that by calling Scott Walker at 415-979-9998. 415-979-9998. You can email him, scott@walkercorporatelaw.com, or you can visit walkercorporatelaw.com as well. Scott@walkercorporatelaw.com, and let Scott Ed Walker on Twitter know, at Scott Ed Walker, know that you watch the program and you appreciate him supporting independent media like This Week in Startups. One of my oldest advertisers, one of my oldest friends in the industry, just a great guy, a total mensch, and he really takes care of the startups who work with him. Thank you, Scott Walker, for supporting This Week in Startups. Bye-bye. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to This Week in Startups. I'm your host, Jason Calacanis. Thank you for writing a great review on the iTunes store or wherever you're listening to this. I love reading those reviews. I get like a little email every time somebody writes those reviews. And it shouldn't mean anything to me, but like I read the entire thing, I obsess over it a little bit. Like if it's long, I read it twice. It's nice to get a review in the iTunes store, even at this point, after 600 or 700 episodes and a full-time staff and all the fancy microphones. I really love when you guys write me a little review like that. And then when it's like detailed and stuff like that, which you like. All right, my guest today, Blake Scholl, and he is B. Scholl on the Twitter, BSCHOLL. And he is the founder and CEO of Boom Technology, which he's been working on in stealth for a couple of years. You started this. When did you form it as a company?
It was September 2014, kind of officially.
Okay. So in 2014, you made a company
Yes.
to do this. And when we left you before the commercial break, we were talking about, hey, how did you go about figuring out if this is a real business or not? And is it a viable business? Because frankly, my understanding of it was, and you'll tell me which are my misconceptions. Number one, it's very expensive because it burns a lot of fuel. Number two, the planes were extremely expensive to maintain and complex. And there was a small audience for it because it didn't save enough time to make people want to spend. The 2 hours was $15,000 extra or $10,000 extra. It wasn't worth it for people.
Right.
What did I get right? What did I get wrong in my assumptions?
Well, that's all true.
Okay.
Except you can do better today.
You can do better today.
You can do better today. So
Okay.
the Concorde was 1950s technology. And today we've got better aerodynamics. We've got software optimized aerodynamics. We've got better engines, lighter materials. And here's the key thing. If you can improve on Concorde's fuel economy by about 30%, just 30%.
Seems
then
doable.
You can do, very doable. Then you can do a supersonic seat for the same fuel that a lay flat bed in business class would take. That's the key. That's what makes this feasible.
So you looked at it and said, hey, I will give you a non-reclining seat. Like you're not going to get to lounge out and be in a sleeper seat, but you're going to get there super fast. So you're trading a little bit of that creature comfort for speed.
It's sort of, but not really. The flying from San Francisco to Tokyo in time and experience will be like flying from San Francisco to New York. So you get like a first class seat, but it's not lay flat.
Right.
You get there so fast you can sleep in a real bed.
Right, which is a good way of looking at it. Okay, now making it 30% more efficient. The design is obviously a little bit different. I'm looking at the plane right here. It looks longer and narrower than the Concorde. Am I correct?
That's correct.
Looking at it?
Yes.
So explain to me, as a lay person who's got enough technical knowledge to get himself in trouble now and again, what is unique about the design? And did you get that 30% just from the design?
Yeah, I mean, there are a bunch of pieces in the design that add up. It's part aerodynamics, part engines, part materials, and all adds up to that 30% actually with some margin. Concorde, so 50 years old technology, right? It was a big, long tube made out of aluminum because when you're working in aluminum, big, long tubes is what are easy to make. But for a subsonic aircraft, that's fine. For a supersonic aircraft, it's much more sensitive to the shaping. So think of, like if you're familiar with the B-1 bomber, take a look at that. Very dynamic shape. That was built in aluminum at enormous expense. But today we've got carbon fiber composites. And what you can do with carbon fiber is mold it in any shape that you want. So you can use software to design an optimized shape. And then you can use carbon fiber to actually realize that. So if you look at our airplane, it's not a big long tube. It's a little bit fatter up front. It's a little bit skinnier in the back where the wings stick out. That's a principle called area ruling, which makes a huge difference in aerodynamic efficiency when you're supersonic.
So you're going to get yourself 10, 20, 30% more efficient. What do you think the efficiency will be? The efficiency gains will be between Boom and Concorde?
Well, it's a minimum of 30%. We've got some margin in there too.
Oh, so it might even be better.
Might even be better.
Okay, now I've been reading about sonic boom, and they say that they're going to be able to narrow the boom, that there are some experimental military planes and drones that are being experimented with. And who knows, they may exist already. We don't have full knowledge of what's going on in the military, that can go supersonic over land, and you hear a thump, not a boom.
That's right.
Explain that to the audience. Does that actually exist yet? And will that play into this? Do you see a time when boom will go New York to LA, or New York to San Francisco in an hour and a half or two?
Yes. I mean, that's absolutely coming. It's just a question of timing. And today in the United States, there's literally a speed limit. No supersonic over land. Doesn't matter how quiet you are. Doesn't matter if you go and you play Beethoven while you fly.
Right.
You're not allowed to do it. The technology exists to quiet the boom quite a bit. And so this airplane, our design, will be about 100 times quieter than Concorde. So that's a huge improvement. Is that enough to get the rules changed? I don't know. And smart, I think smart startup thinking on this says don't count on any regulatory change. So we're thinking overwater supersonic, and when the rules get changed and we can fly supersonic over land, hallelujah.
Okay, but you could take like the Lyft or the Airbnb or Uber approach and just sort of break the rule and see what happens.
That'd be interesting, wouldn't it?
Can you imagine you start flying supersonic over the United States? I think they might shoot you down. They would definitely ground your plane. Okay, so this is a crazy idea. And what is it going to cost to realize? Because, listen, you create, what was the company you created that you sold to Groupon? Was it like a deals-based email
it was
thing?
mobile e-commerce technology. Totally different as far as capital intensity.
Yeah. You made an app. You made some software before.
Right.
Now you're talking about building what I think looks, I'm going to take a guess here. I don't know. I haven't done the research. But I'm thinking it screams to me of $1 billion to get the first one out the door and $300 million per plane. What does this cost?
You're not too far off.
300 million per plane?
So I like to tell people that we can build the entire company and get to break even.
Got it.
For less money than Uber races in a round.
Okay.
But it's still a lot of money, but it's not an obtainable amount of money. And so you approach it like a startup and you do it sequentially. Like we're flying next year with a subscale prototype, which will go Mach 2.2. It'll set speed records. But it's much less expensive to build versus the full scale, certified to take passengers, proven safe airplane.
So you're actually making one for next summer.
Oh, end of next year is when it will fly.
End of next year. So in 19, 20 months from the taping of this,
yes,
you will have a smaller version of the boom.
Correct.
How many people will be able to be in it? 2, 4?
Two, actually, yeah.
2.
So it's a 1/3 scale by length, so it's 1/9 by volume, and that's enough room for a pilot and a passenger.
And you'll be able to go over Mach 2 with it.
Yes.
1,400 miles per hour.
Yes.
And if you prove that, then you can start taking orders, or you've already started taking orders?
We've already started taking orders, actually. This surprised me that it was possible this early. Okay. We have 25 airplanes on LOI.
Okay. Letter of intent.
Letter of intent, correct.
Okay.
So not binding yet.
Not binding.
But it's...
Does it include a deposit?
It will.
It will.
Not yet, but it will.
So like the Tesla, to reserve your spot in line, you're going to have to put something down. I'm assuming slightly more than the $1,000 that Elon's charging for the Tesla Model 3 will be the deposit for a boom. If not, I'm going to put down a deposit for the first 25 planes.
Right.
What will the deposit be? And what will the cost of the plane be? Ballpark. Hundreds of millions?
The price of the plane is $200 million.
Okay.
$200 million. And deposits, we'll see.
What did the Concorde program cost? And they built 25 planes or something?
They built 20 planes. And
20
so,
planes.
I mean,
they spent $10
Jason,
billion?
it's remarkable the thing ever flew.
Right.
So it was a joint venture between the French and British governments.
Right.
So this screams efficiency, right? They couldn't, for example, the technical documentation was in French and in English. They couldn't decide how many factories to build, so they put one in France and one in Britain.
Yeah, they were fighting. I think I saw a special on this where they were fighting over who got to build which pieces.
Yes.
Which, on an engineering basis, when the unions were fighting over who got the jobs to do different pieces, that was a little bit weird, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, so that you can do things way more efficiently. And Elon has really shown the path to this with SpaceX, of what happens when you're scrappy. You hire a smaller number of really phenomenal people. You put them all in one room. You keep them around the hardware. You can execute way faster for way less money.
So you're going to start building this prototype, or have you started building the prototype?
We're in sort of test part manufacturing today. So if you walked into our hangar, you'd find mock-ups of the airplane. You'd find the engine. You'd find pieces of the wing.
Well, who makes the engine? And is it a normal engine, or is it a Rolls-Royce engine or a Boeing engine?
Yes. So the prototype airplane flies with an off-the-shelf General Electric engine, which NASA has flown to Mach 2.5. We're going to take it to Mach 2.2.
So the standard General Electric engine that's out there, or one of the powerful ones that does what, like an A320 or something, or what is that engine used for? So
the engine that's in the prototype is smaller. So it flew on some early Learjets, for example. And for the production aircraft, the one that's going to carry 40 people, it's an adaptation of a current commercial engine.
So the engines exist. That's not the big deal.
Yes, actually, that's a huge deal that they exist.
Yeah.
If the engines didn't exist, this whole company wouldn't be possible.
So has the engine technology changed? The engine technology has changed phenomenally, hasn't it, over the last 20 years?
Yes, it's changed tremendously. Concorde flew in afterburners, and if you don't know what an afterburner is,
I don't. Explain.
It's like taking raw fuel, literally, and dumping it in the exhaust of the airplane. So when you turn on the afterburner, you're spending 50% more gas for like 20% more thrust. It's awful. Terrible way to get thrust. Hey, you can do better. There's just better technology.
And so you'll have who's ordering these, by the way? Or is it the Virgin
Yeah, so the
Atlantic
the first 10 are for Virgin Group, which basically means that Richard can use them in whatever airline he chooses.
Okay. So Richard ordered 10.
Mm-hmm.
And at $200 million, it kind of, the billionaire crowd would be attracted to having these, I think, but that wouldn't be reasonable to operate as a for private aviation.
It'd be probably a stretch. I mean, some people can make it. There's a guy in Saudi Arabia who purchased an A380. That's the double decker.
Yeah, I heard about
for his
that.
own personal use. So some people will have to have this. But we're aiming at, our vision is to make Earth more accessible for everybody.
Right.
So the ticket prices out of the gate will be about business class. And over time, we're going to chip away at that until everybody can afford to fly.
So $5,000.
$5,000 round trip. New York,
Round
London.
trip?
Round trip.
To London?
Mm-hmm.
I thought Virgin Atlantic was $5,000 each way right now. It's like $10,000.
I mean, it depends on when you look at the price, right?
Right.
And you have to model, when you're doing the business, you have to model out what are the average actual prices, net of all the discounts. So the average will be able to support us about $5,000 round trip.
Now, we talked a little bit about SpaceX. They're a full stack company. Uber's a full stack company, but you're going to sell the planes to other people. Have you thought, well, why don't I just create the Boom and then create Boom Airlines?
There's some days you get up and you think, oh, that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
But it's one hard problem at a time. And
Got
airlines are a complicated business. Building a supersonic airplane is a complicated business. So one thing at a time.
But you that must be on the chart. So you must be thinking about that. Maybe if we build it, we could just operate it ourselves.
Maybe. I mean, I think there's a lot of appeal to working with airlines, and
there is.
Yes.
What are they?
Well, you get to accumulate an order book, for example. That's key to this business. If you want engine companies to work with you, you want to be able to to raise the capital you need for this. Typically, the way it works for new airliner programs is you show that you've got a bunch of orders, and then you go finance that. So if my business plan is I'm going to sell a bunch of airplanes to myself, that's hard to finance.
And let's talk a little bit about the sonic boom or the clap. When is that issue going to be resolved? Because it has been coming up. Why is it coming up now as an issue? Is it because the government wants to start doing some covert planes that can do it?
I mean, it's been on the drawing board it's been on the drawing board for decades. Honestly,
Okay.
This is one of these things that's been 20 years away for the last 20 years.
Got it.
And is it right around the corner now? I hope the answer is yes. But it's much more about politics than science.
Got it. So it takes somebody having a supersonic plane in order for that thump issue to be addressed, doesn't it?
Well, in my view of how this is actually going to be changed, this is not going to be some government research thing. It's going to be when we're living in a world where you can get from San Francisco to Tokyo in less time than you can get from San Francisco to New York.
Some people are going to get pissed off.
Yeah, people are going to be pissed off, and they're going to say, can you tell me why we can't get to New York in 2 hours? And then you'll play the sound, and they'll say, really? That's the reason? That's not bad at all.
The thump is not that bad.
It's not that bad.
It's
Concorde was actually loud. It would sound like kind of 2 gunshots in quick succession. That's annoying, but you can do so much better today.
And the Concorde would slow down as it was coming into JFK.
Exactly.
So they didn't have the sonic boom over Long Island, right?
Correct.
They had to go down to whatever, 600 miles per hour or something while they were coming in on approach. So
Correct.
they actually probably could have gone even faster between the two cities.
Yeah, I mean, so New York to London is mostly over water. So it doesn't make that much of a big difference. You have to slow down when you're going to land anyway. Nobody lands supersonic.
Yeah, it's a fair point. You're not going to land at 1,400 miles per hour, hopefully.
That's called a crash, yes.
All right, when we get back, I want to know how soon before we will be able to buy a ticket on a supersonic plane when we get back on This Week in Startups. Hey everybody, let me take a moment to thank my friends at Squarespace. They make gorgeous websites in minutes, and it is so affordable. I do these crazy ideas where I'm just like, I say to my team, hey, I want to do something where I just like invite a bunch of angel investors to come away for the weekend, and we'll shoot clay pigeons, and we'll go on hikes, we'll play poker, and we'll talk about being angel investors. So I say, go get the domain name Launch Angel Summit, and I just say that in a chat room somewhere. And literally, before I write the copy for the website, My team emails me back what you see on my screen right here, which is this gorgeous, they said, well, we assume you want to do it up in nature because you said, hey, maybe in Napa or maybe in Sonoma. They find some stock images of gorgeous photos. They put it in the background, and we say, Launch Angel Summit, 50 angel investors, 2 days of discussions, debate, learning, hiking, and late night poker, Northern California, request an invitation. We get that up in seconds, and it looks like something that was made by one of these agencies, that you spend tens of thousands of dollars, and they have tons of templates. And now, when I launch 5 or 6 different pages on here, including selling tickets or selling t-shirts, they have e-commerce. It's intuitive and easy to use. There's no coding required. And I said to my team, listen, we need to have these professionally state-of-the-art websites, but I want anybody on the team to be able to update the site, because this is one of my pet peeves. If I need something changed on the website, we constantly come up with some innovation inside of our company, and then the public doesn't know about it. Which what I tell my teams and I tell my startups I invest in is, if you don't take credit for what you're doing, then nobody knows. You have to take credit. It has to exist on the web so that you can tweet it, so that you can Facebook it, so you can share it, so people can read it. And it has to look beautiful and gorgeous. So everybody in my organization now knows how to use Squarespace. We just did a little primer. It took 15 minutes. We put all 8 people around a computer and said, here's how it works. Here's how to add pages. Here's how to use a template. No credit card is required if you want to start a free trial right now. And I'm begging you, go to squarespace.com and do it, because it will change your life forever. You can get a free domain if you sign up for a year, which is ridiculous. And when you do decide to sign up for Squarespace and put in your credit card, which you don't have to do in the beginning, you can just use the offer code TWIST and you'll get 10% off your first purchase. It is state-of-the-art, secure, stable, and trusted by millions. It's some of the most respected brands in the world, including my own, use the product. That's all you need to know. It gets my highest endorsement. We use it for the Launch Incubator site. We use it for the Launch Festival. We use it for Launch Hackathon. We use it for the Launch Angel Summit. We use it for everything, and we love it. It's so easy to use, and it's so gorgeous. Thank you at Squarespace. Hey everybody, it's Jason Calacanis, and you're listening to This Week in Startups. My guest today, Blake Scholl. Is it Scholl?
Scholl.
Yeah, Scholl. And he is a serial entrepreneur who has founded a company called Boom Technology. And you can find them at boom.aero. A-E-R-O, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Aero? What extension is
Aero.
that? Aero.
Okay. Yeah, like aerodynamics.
Yeah, who came up with that extension?
They made up everything when they did the new TLDs, right? New
I think we got to try and get you boom.com. I don't know who's got boom.com, but
working on it.
Yeah, exactly. It will just cost you one plane. So how many seats are going to be on this plane? And you get the prototype out, the end of 2017, you're saying? Mm-hmm. So does that mean we could buy a flight in 2020? They say 3 or 4 years to get this out?
Something like that. We haven't announced the exact schedule yet. Obviously, being fans of speed, we're doing this as quickly as you can. Right. But it's a big deal to put people on a passenger airplane, and you have to make it safe. And there's a high regulatory bar as well. So it takes some time to go from the first demonstration that the technology works to it's gone through all the safety testing that you need to put passengers on it.
So what do you think the range will be? What's the earliest you could get us on a flight?
Oh, I can't say today. We'll announce the schedule after we fly the prototype.
Right. Get the prototype out the door. Then you got to start building that, because you're going to have to raise a ton of money or get those pre-orders in.
Correct.
So you have to prove to the pre-order people, like, hey, we're capable of putting this thing out.
Right.
A prototype like that, you can build that yourself, like with what? How do you manufacture all this carbon fiber and everything?
Right. So carbon fiber today is kind of a commodity.
Yeah.
In the particular material systems, there's the way it works is there's carbon fiber, and then there's this resin that holds it together.
Right.
And that's a commodity. You can buy it off the shelf. In fact, there are a number of good companies that will make it for you in whatever shape you want. And we're working with a great one that's done supersonic stuff before. They're going to make big pieces of the airframe. Then our job is to put that together into the whole airplane.
And have planes been made out of carbon fiber before?
Yes, that's one of the reasons
common,
this is.
Or?
It is common. In fact, it's the new state of the art.
It is.
So the first large airliner that was carbon fiber was the Boeing 787.
Okay.
And Boeing spent billions to prove that it was safe, and we get to go draft on that.
Because most people would think carbon fiber at these high speeds, and there's a lot of stress on these planes.
Yes, but it's actually performs better than aluminum. Concorde was speed limited in large part by aluminum, which is when you get sufficiently hot, it gets soft, it loses some of its structural properties.
Huh.
Yes. And in carbon fiber with the right resin systems is actually stronger at high temperature than aluminum.
So when you start going 1,400 miles an hour, whipping through the air,
yes,
creates enough friction that aluminum would start to melt
it gets soft, and that's not good.
Yeah,
you don't want a soft airplane.
And what about these very light jets now? Are they made out of carbon fiber now? Is that like a big?
Many of the newer ones are. Yes, it's just a better
like the
technology.
Phenoms and stuff like that.
The Cirrus jet is definitely carbon fiber. I'm not sure about the Phenom.
Oh, the Cirrus jet is the new jet that's coming out from Cirrus, which is the parachute airplane. Was that what you trained on? Were you a Cirrus guy?
I trained on Cessnas, and all my time lately is in Cirruses because they're just wonderful airplanes.
My friend Sky had one of those where he was flying with. I flew in it with him when he was gonna go test it. We flew to Vegas. That thing's got a parachute in it.
Yeah, it's great. My wife is so happy that I fly in an airplane with a parachute.
But the thing about those planes is the avionics has gotten so good that a lot of people who are recreational pilots, it's so easy in good weather and in good conditions that they take risks and they die or have to pull the parachute because it gives you a false sense of security, the avionics, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think you can definitely get lazy as a pilot.
When you have those crazy avionics.
Yeah, you can go up, turn the autopilot on. I've been with other pilots who get up at altitude, they turn the autopilot on and they read a book. This scares the bejesus out of me.
Literally, they're in the air and they just take out a book.
Yes.
Because there's no chance that anything could go in front of the plane, right? These planes do have avoidance alerts on them.
They do, but
I
wouldn't bet my life on that, though.
No, not at all, because it gives you time to go up or down or whatever, left or right, but it doesn't automatically avoid it. Which brings to the question, you're building this at a time when autonomy seems to be the goal. Why even have pilots? If you're building this platform from the ground up, why is there even a pilot on it? Wouldn't it be more efficient to have it be completely autonomous?
I think that's the future of flight.
Yeah.
When you think about a car versus an airplane, even if the car is full, 25% of people in the car have to drive it, right? When you've got an airplane with dozens or hundreds of people, the impact of having to have a pilot economically is spread across all those passengers. So it's
no big deal.
It's not. Yeah. So it's less of an impact. Less. For that reason, it's less economically urgent. On one hand, on the other hand, there's a tremendous amount of pilot creativity that occasionally makes a difference. Like the guy that landed in the Hudson. It's pretty hard to build an AI that's going to say, I lost both engines. Let's go land in the river.
Right.
Will that happen eventually?
Is it?
Absolutely.
Is it that hard? I mean, I think the plane would say that's the only logical place. Well, do you think we romanticize that a bit? That Sully was the only person capable of getting it down there, and because it seems to me like a computer would figure that out better and maybe not panic.
Yeah, well, there are 1,000 edge cases like that. 1,000 edge cases, if not more, and you have to make sure you cover them all. And this will happen eventually. It won't necessarily happen quickly. Because
what percentage of flights on commercial time do you think the autopilot is engaged? In other words, humans are not involved.
Like north of 99%. It's
north of 99%, including the landing.
Possibly including landing, yeah.
Yeah. A lot of times they'll land with the autopilot, correct?
Correct, yeah. There's auto land on most new aircraft.
Interesting. So, but that doesn't save any money necessarily. It could save more lives, though, if it was less prone to... I'm trying to think of the edge cases in which a human is prone to make mistakes.
Right. Yeah. I mean, so that's the trade-off of how many mistakes are due to human error and how many saves are due to human ingenuity. And at a certain point, those lines will cross, and it'll be better to take the humans out.
Have people done those studies? Have you seen that research done where like the amount of error? Because we only hear about a lot of times when the pilots make the errors, right? It seems like what was the flight from I think it was an Air France flight where the wind speed the speed indicators were off.
Correct. Yeah, and that's another edge case you have to cover in the software.
Which is they didn't know how fast they were going.
Right.
And they thought they were going very fast, And they stalled the plane. Is that
Correct.
right?
That's what happened. Yeah, and there's some real lessons in cockpit design from that too.
Tell everybody about that case. I just think it's fascinating.
Yeah, so
because pilots talk about this stuff. This is what I love about you guys and gals.
Well, there's a great human factor story in this, so I'll tell the human factor story.
Please.
This is Air France, I think 447.
Yep.
Nothing wrong with the airplane. They're cruising at 35,000-ish feet.
It was like Sao Paulo it was Brazil, I think, to
Paris, I think, yes. And the airspeed sensor iced over, and that put the plane in a mode where the autopilot wouldn't behave the way it normally would.
Right.
It goes into what they call alternate mode. And when you're in alternate mode, a lot of the automatic protections of the airplane aren't there. So normally you cannot stall a commercial aircraft. It just won't let you do it.
Right.
But by the way, a stall base is not the engine quitting. A stall is when you pull the nose of the airplane up and you are now so steeply inclined in the air that the wings don't fly. You cease to fly, you start to fall. That's a stall.
You don't have wind underneath the wings, keeping the plane up.
Right.
So the plane has no lift.
Plane has no lift. It falls.
It falls.
Yeah, it's a bad day.
Right.
Unless you recover from it properly. So what and you learn this as a pilot of small aircraft. If you get in a stall situation, you put the nose down.
Right. Because you need speed.
You need speed.
Speed equals lift.
Speed equals lift. Exactly.
I'm not a pilot and I know that.
Well, so what happened on this Air France flight? So there's a pilot and a co-pilot.
Right.
And the co-pilot kind of freaked out.
Yeah.
And he hauled all the way back on his stick.
Right. And she was like, no, push it forward.
Right. So you've got so this is an Airbus cockpit. They are fly-by-wire. These two sticks are not physically connected. So if you and I are flying an airplane together, you can be doing one thing with your stick. I can be doing another thing with my stick. And what does the airplane do?
The average?
The average.
Oh my God. Which is obviously the worst possible thing you could ever do.
Yes, exactly. And it plays a message that says conflicting inputs. But by the way, when you're in this distress situation, there are 1,000 error messages, and of course they're conflicting inputs. So you don't hear it. You don't know what's going on. And this is a big difference between the Boeing and Airbus cockpits. Actually, in Boeing, even when it's a computerized flight system, the sticks are connected to each other. So if you and I are fighting over the controls, we know we're fighting over the controls.
Right. That's a really interesting human dynamics thing.
Yes.
Human factors.
Correct.
Where in a panic situation, humans naturally pull back and want lift. You want to go up.
Right.
It's human nature.
Right.
But in fact, you want to go down and get that speed.
Exactly.
But it was really interesting. These little air speed indicators, I didn't realize this, they hang off the airplane.
Right. It's called a pitot tube.
And it's a little tiny tube, and it measures the air going through it.
Right.
And it's amazing how the sensor technology started this cascading effect.
Right. Yeah. Nothing really wrong with the airplane yet sadly everyone died.
Did you listen to that cockpit conversation, like in the transcripts?
I've read some of the transcript. I don't think I've listened to the audio.
I am not a pilot, but I am obsessed with listening to those things, and I'm trying to understand it. You know about the flight from Albany or Syracuse where they flew in and they had the wings were iced?
This is regional jet.
The regional jet.
And it was iced, and then they stalled it.
Yep. Crazy.
Yeah,
they had never flown in conditions with ice. The pilots had never flown with ice.
It's amazing, isn't it?
The regional jets are very dangerous, aren't they?
Well, they're more dangerous, but you have to zoom out and place the whole thing in context.
Okay.
Do you know how many people died in a jetliner accident last year?
It was zero.
Zero.
I happen to, as you know, people know watching the program that I am well versed on many subjects. I happen to know last year it was zero.
It was zero.
Because it does happen so infrequently. And that's in the United States, to be clear.
No, that's worldwide.
Was it zero worldwide?
Zero worldwide.
Wow.
There were two incidents, but they weren't accidents.
Wait, what about correct, because the German guy who was suicidal smashed it into the side.
Yeah, basically everybody who died in an airliner last year was murdered.
Yes. Some by the German pilot suffering depression, other ones by Putin.
Correct.
Who apparently gave the order to, maybe not directly, but there was a Ukrainian flight, right? What was the...
It was a Malaysian Airlines.
A Malaysian airline was shot down over the Ukraine.
Right.
And I think that I have the executive producer, Jackie, will check for me. You know, I'm not perfect in all of my knowledge, but so that was shot down, so that doesn't count either. It's very safe. But the regional airlines, were you surprised when you started doing pilot lessons how few hours you needed to go up alone?
Yeah, that was a little scary because you can do it in like 10 hours. And there's no, legally, there's no minimum. It's just when your flight instructor says, okay, you can go. When
did your flight instructor tell you, okay, why don't you go up alone? And what went through your mind at that moment, Blake?
Well, I remember the story. So he was prepping me for the flight, and he said, when you do your first solo, expect that there will be something different. And so I got to the airport that day, and the winds were backwards from what they usually were, which means you take off and land in the opposite direction.
Right.
Which is not that big a deal, but if you've learned the visual, when you're doing your pilot training, you learn like, oh, when I see that building, that's where I make my turn.
Yeah.
And so you don't get those visual references. You have to just, look around, look for the runways. And I figured that would be, okay, that's my different thing. I got up there, did a couple loops around around the airport, landed a couple times, and then the door popped open on the airplane.
The door
popped open.
On a Cirrus 17...
This is a Cessna 172.
172, okay.
And so I'm sitting here.
The door opens. Your door or the passenger?
My door. It's like 6 inches from me.
It cracks open.
It opens, right?
Wow.
And then I'm like, okay, fly the plane.
Fly the plane.
Fly the plane. I'm like, okay, try to pull the door in. You can't get the door in. There's too much air. I'm like, okay, I'll push it open. I'll slam it. Well, pushing the door open on a small plane causes the plane to turn.
Of course, yes. You created a rudder.
Exactly.
Just pull the flap.
Right. So I ended up landing with one hand on the control wheel and one hand holding the door in. For
bracing it.
Yeah.
How many hours had you been flying?
It must have been 15 or so.
15?
Yeah, something like that. Not a ton.
That's for me. I don't know if I could do it. I'm a pretty courageous guy, but I just think like those small planes, they make me very nervous. The small planes are very dangerous.
They are totally different ballgame from commercial aircraft.
Because the people flying them or just the hardware?
It's actually mostly the people flying them,
yeah,
and the conditions in which you fly. When you fly commercially, the entire process is scripted, systematized, debugged. And in a small aircraft, you're much more on your own judgment, and the discipline, there's no system around you to enforce a lot of discipline. So that the statistics actually show that commercial aircraft pilots, when they fly small planes, make way more mistakes.
Commercial
airline pilots who are very safe flying a 747 have more human error-driven accidents in small planes.
Now why is that? Because you think they let their guard down because it's only them in the plane, they don't feel the sense of duty?
Yeah, I think that's part of it.
Yeah.
It's a really interesting psychology thing of, am I in a system that's constantly reinforcing discipline, or do I kind of wing it and I figure, I can make that work?
And this is where checklists, I don't know if you've ever read their book, The Checklist Manifesto.
I love that book.
Isn't that a great book? Checklist Manifesto is my Audible selection of the day. They're not a partner or sponsor on this episode, but they have in the past. But what a great book. Explain to everybody the story about was it the B-2 bomber that they had the checklist for? What was the big plane they had the checklist for? I can't remember the name off the top of my head.
The big plane with the checklist.
In the book, when they talk about the Checklist Manifesto, they were talking about one of the planes was so big and complex that one pilot couldn't, the way they used to have the structure of it was you'd have one pilot in charge.
Right.
And then everybody else would do what they said. But so they really didn't have like a delegation system. But then because of this checklist, they created checklists and then they would run them down with each other. So they sort of dispersed the load of maintaining.
Yeah, splitting the load across pilots is a big deal as well. So typically for a commercial aircraft, you'll have one pilot reading the checklist, another one doing it. Much less likely you skip steps.
Right. I think this plane had like 6 engines or 8 engines or something crazy.
It sounds like a B-52.
I think it was the B-52. Like they thought it would never work. And then when they got the checklist going. So a company like this, venture capitalists today, are they willing to back a company like this? Or do you have to get some crazy angels and be a crazy founder yourself who made a little bit of cheddar to put up the money for this and prove it?
Yeah, well, I think time will tell on that.
Okay. So right now you guys have raised a couple $1 million, $2 million?
Yeah, before YC, a couple $1 million. Got
it.
And then after YC, we'll talk about it in a bit.
Okay, good. Yeah, so you're in the probably, this is at the time of this taping, you're shortly after YC Demo Day, which I heard was fabulous. I missed it. Just randomly, was busy that day. But I'm sure that was a little kerfluffle there. But I didn't get to see it, so I guess I don't know if I'm excluded from investing in it. But what will it take you to build the prototype? It sounds like $25 million to build the prototype.
Actually, less than that.
Really? 10, 20, something in that range?
In that range, yeah.
That's very fascinating when you think about it, how little it costs for you to make a prototype that goes supersonic.
Yes. It's again, the bar for commercial aircraft is really high, as it should be.
Right.
The bar for experimental one-off
is disturbingly low.
I don't know if it's disturbingly low. The responsibility is all on you to build something that actually works.
But people build kits, right? Like people build kit planes all the time.
Yes.
Out in the country, you live out in Nebraska, people build these kit planes.
Right.
which I always find unbelievable.
I can tell you a story.
Yeah, let me hear that.
So when I was first getting this business started, of course, I had to get an amazing team together.
Sure.
And so I was living in the Bay Area at the time and flying Cirrus's out of Palo Alto Airport. And so I would take off from Palo Alto and I'd fly down to Mojave in Southern California, which is like the hotbed of experimental aviation.
Yeah.
And there was...
It's actually where the private aviation kind of phenomenon started, with Southern California, right?
Yeah, that's where Burt Rutan set up
Yeah.
scaled composites, and it's still a hotbed of innovation.
Yeah.
So I was going down there a lot, kind of on recruiting trips.
Right.
And one of the first times I was down there, I was very new to the whole thing. Like I had my pilot skills and like a little bit more, but not yet a ton. And I was getting a tour of the hangars, and there is something amazing behind every hangar in that airport. And so this guy showed me his hangar, and he had in there a Burt Rutan designed aircraft, one of a kind, that he had refurbished. And so I'm looking at this aircraft, I'm thinking, I want to ask a question about it, but it can't be a stupid question, right? And so he looked at the wings, and there were these bumps about a foot out from the fuselage on the wings. I'm like, well, that's different. Haven't seen that before. What's that? And he said, oh, that's a great question. Well, when we built this, we didn't want to build a new landing gear from scratch. So we stole one off another airplane, but it didn't fit. And so we cut a hole in the wing and we put some fiberglass over it. And then he says, let me show you what we did with the nose wheel. And so apparently the nose wheel they'd also stolen off of another airplane. Wow. And it would retract if it wasn't canted just right. It would kind of jam and not go into the wheel well. Well, they fixed that by drilling a hole from the cockpit into the wheel well and giving the pilot a stick. Yeah, to poke the wheel if it's not aligned correctly.
It's not aligned correctly.
And at that moment was when I realized that people in Mojave hack on airplanes the way people in Silicon Valley hack on software.
Yeah, and it's very dangerous. John Denver died doing an experimental plane.
Would you believe that the hangar that we're in Denver is John Denver's old hangar?
You're kidding.
Seriously, we have his desk. We converted it into a bar.
It's a major tragedy. He was an avid pilot, and he decided he wanted to fly experimental planes, and he died in an experimental plane. I don't know which one. Do you know which one?
I think it was a Rutan design. I think a Long Easy.
And do you know the nature of that accident, or nobody does?
I don't. I think. I mean,
so sad.
Yeah, so sad.
Yeah, but you're in his hangar now.
We're literally in his hangar.
Wow. So you had to hire people who knew much more about aviation than yourself, because let's face it, you were a web guy, a software guy, who got a recreational pilot's license and now wants to build Concorde 2.0.
Right.
There's a little bit of a gap between what you know and what the people who built the Concorde know. A little bit. How do you, who's the first person you get on the team or the second person you get on the team, and how do you convince them that you're not insane?
Right.
Because
So I think,
or did people take you as insane when you said, I want to rebuild this? Because to me, this does not seem like an insane project. This seems like almost like a reclamation project. Like, well, of course, we should just pick up where we left off.
You get all manner of responses. But first off, I think most people underestimate as adults how much they can learn, how much new things they can learn, and how quickly they can get deep.
Right.
Especially with experience, you start to learn what knowledge really feels like, what clarity feels like, and what it feels like when you don't have it.
Right.
So I spent about 6 months or so teaching myself aerospace engineering fundamentals, just reading textbooks, doing problem sets, meeting smart people, showing them my work and saying, can you check this? And people are really generous with their time, especially when you tell them what you're trying to do. And so I learned a ton from that. And I got at least to the point where I could judge the people I might hire. And we went through it an exercise where the first couple of people in the company, so critical. And I wanted the best people in the industry. So I asked everybody I met in aerospace, if you had a magic wand and you could wave it and you could get anybody to come work on this project, who do you want? And you start to see what names come up.
And then which ones come up multiple times.
Exactly. And so a little over a year ago, we had about half a dozen candidates for the first couple roles on the company. And we flew them all out to the Bay Area, got a conference room for a couple of days, and said, let's tear this whole thing apart technologically, and also tear apart, like, what are the lessons of how you build an airplane company? And you can tell, you sit in a room with half a dozen really, really bright people. And these people were like the inventor of the personal jet, the chief engineer from Atom Aircraft.
Which was what, Eclipse? What was the first, is that the first person?
Well, sort of. The first one that's successful is really looking like the Cirrus jet.
Yeah.
The chief engineer from Spaceship One and Spaceship Two, whose airplane is in the Smithsonian. Like, this was a high level room. And you spend a couple days with those people and you quickly figure out who are the ones you really want to work with. And so we hired 2 people out of that room. They became my chief engineer and my CTO.
Got it.
And from that point on, we just kept the same process of like find the best people in the world to come work on this. People go into aerospace because they either want to build a rocket and go and colonize Mars, in which case they should go work at SpaceX.
Right.
Or they want to work on fast airplanes.
Right.
In which case they should come and work at Boom.
Yeah. And what is the upper limit of how fast a plane will be able to go in your mind? Because you said you're going to go a little bit faster than the Concorde did, right?
Yes.
2.4, Mach 2.4.
2.2.
2.2. And the Concorde went 2.0. 2.0. And commercial flights?
About 0.85.
0.85.
The bigger ones.
So this is like roughly 2.5 times faster
That's right. Yeah, it's as much faster than a 747 than the 747 was versus like a propeller DC-3.
Right. So this is a big jump.
It's a big jump.
Is there another big jump that'll happen? Because I've been hearing like maybe going out into low Earth orbit.
Yeah, that's a long ways away because it's extremely energy intensive. But there's some intermediate things that are very real. So we chose Mach 2.2 because it's what you can do with proven technology today. Like every key technology in this airplane is already approved by the FAA.
Got it.
Which is a huge deal for making it feasible as a startup company.
Because you might be able to go faster because you have the engine made. You don't have to make the afterburners or like the Concorde did.
Right.
Or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, so, long term, I want to live in a world where you can get anywhere in 5 hours for $100. That's a decades-long mission, but there's nothing physically impossible in that.
So does that mean at some point the electric jet that Elon's been joking about could become a reality, or is it just impossible to have the battery density?
The battery density is the problem. Like
Right.
jet fuel versus batteries is a factor of 60.
Right.
And batteries are getting better. And we're used to Moore's law where things double, and batteries double, but they double like every 10 years.
Yeah.
So it doesn't look like it's right around the corner unless you've got a major breakthrough in batteries.
What would it be then? Would it be some new energy system? Like would it literally be like some fusion or nuclear reaction in a plane?
Possibly. I mean, you need to get to 5 hours for $100. You do need to make progress in energy technology. That would be the fundamental focus area. And even if you're doing it with batteries, you'd still have to generate the power more efficiently than we can today. Right. But again, there's nothing physically impossible.
It is a fascinating time we live in that somebody can go and actually, it's quite possible you'll be able to raise the money to build this prototype, isn't it?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. You'll definitely be able to get it done to do the prototype?
We'll definitely get it done.
So if you get
this whole thing is actually happening. There's no science fiction really doing it.
Was there a time at which you felt you crossed over and you felt confident enough that this would actually happen? Because it's not like, you didn't pick like, I'm going to build a better version of Airbnb.
Right.
I'm not building Dropbox.
There was a key moment in the middle of 2014 when I had a spreadsheet model of the airplane that I built using textbook methods that I took to a professor at Stanford who had done a lot of research in supersonics. And I said, hey, would you look at this for me? Like, tell me are the assumptions reasonable? And his feedback was basically, you should be able to do better than that in many cases. And at that point, I felt like either I'm going to find a way to make this happen or I have no courage.
Blake, I'm super excited that insane people like you exist on the planet. It's the reason I like to do this show. It's because it's just a great moment in time we live in that people will look and say, you know what? F it. Concorde stopped. Let's try again.
Right. I have a theory about startups.
Yeah.
Which is the audaciousness of the mission is largely unrelated to the difficulty of doing it.
The audaciousness of the mission is not,
you would think that something that sounds 10 times more impactful would be 10 times harder. That has not been my experience.
Right.
This doesn't feel any harder than my mobile apps company.
Well, you know what? I think what it is if you're a dedicated founder, you're going to put every ounce of life energy you have into building your SaaS product for in-house salespeople to become 7% more efficient, or for, Facebook ads to get clicked 30 basis points more. You could spend 18 hours a day on that. Or you could spend 18 hours a day trying to figure out how to make the nose of the boom, get you to 2.3 Mach,
right.
Mach 2.3. Like, it's the same amount of cognitive load, right? So I think you're right.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
And sometimes the harder problems aren't as much harder as they look.
Yeah, in this case, it's really fascinating that And is anybody else working on it? Is anybody else even?
There's some people working on private jets that might
I heard about that somebody wants to do a supersonic private jet. Is that a legit company, you think? Or are you not sure?
There's one that's legit.
Yeah. How far along are they?
Well, they've been at it for 15 or 20 years. They're taking they're taking a very different approach from what we're doing. It's way less, like no prototyping. I think of Boom as like the Silicon Valley meets airplanes company. Yeah. So there's a lot of prototyping, quick iteration, get to hardware, prove it works. And
are you going to go in that first flight? Let me be honest with you. You going to go in that first flight when you have that prototype?
Not first flight of the prototype.
No.
Like that you need 2 expert test pilots.
So there's no room for you.
There's no room for me. But
put a little jump seat in.
But I will be in that airplane before we have passengers.
Well, for sure. I think you might want to in the prototype put a little jump seat in for yourself. Mm-hmm. Just weasel your way on. It's pretty exciting to be on the Spruce Goose or whatever you're going to call the first one. You got a name for the first one?
Right now, we've got a working name, which is Baby Boom.
Baby Boom.
But we're gonna come up with a different name at some point.
All right, listen. Continued success, Blake, and everybody go check out boom.aero and follow them, Boom AERO, on the Twitter. Thanks to our partners and sponsors and executive producer Jackie with her 4 Emmys. What an amazing producer. She got you on the show a week after you were at Y Combinator Demo Day. What was it like at Demo Day for you guys? Did you get like a ton of attention?
Well, we brought our jet engine to Demo Day, and that gets you a little bit of attention.
These kind of projects we had the Hyperloop at the festival, and it's just like when you have something this groundbreaking, people just flock to it.
And we had a lot of success with the letters of intent. So we had 5 billion in letters of intent to announce on stage. And that's
pretty good.
That went over well.
I mean, it's not 12 or 13 billion in Model 3 pre-orders like Elon Musk has in 48 hours, where he actually got 3% of the money in advance. Isn't that crazy?
That's amazing.
300,000 pre-orders.
It's really inspiring.
It's crazy. I mean, if you think about the scope of a $12 billion order book in 72 hours, I mean, it says something about the world, don't you think?
Yes, and the confidence in Tesla and the excitement about what they're doing.
Right. Like
and the ability today to reach a large audience that didn't exist 10, 15 years ago. The
equivalent for you would, when you get these planes going, if people could order a ticket for, if you could pre-order tickets for $1 per mile, let's say, right? Because that's about what it's going to be, isn't it?
About that.
Yeah, I'm just doing back of the envelope math. Was it 3,500 miles to London or something? Something like that?
A little bit less than that, but about that, yeah.
So anyway, you may call it $1 a mile. You should pre-sell at $1 a mile miles, and I could buy 10,000 miles right now to back it, and then whoever takes the flights will, agree when they buy the planes that they'll honor those 10,000 Boom miles. You should sell Boom miles. A currency of miles.
I love it.
Because I would literally give you $10,000 right now because they'd be like, oh, well, I can take it the first year.
All right, let's do it.
Let's do it. Here we go. All right, I just bought 10,000 Boom miles to show. I think we made about $9,000 in advertising. So net, I think I'm probably almost break even on this episode.
There you go.
All right, listen, continued success. Thank you for coming on the program.
This was a blast.
We'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.